Hello, welcome to the U.S. Center. The U.S. Center is a public diplomacy space organized by the United States Department of State. It's held during the 2 weeks of the COP. In this space, we highlight U.S.-led climate programs and initiatives. We cover a diversity of issues ranging from REDD+ to climate science to resilience. Today we'll be talking about climate and air quality in our next session. I would encourage you, though, to please take a copy of our program in the back. It provides an overview of all of the programs on these diverse topics that you can come join us for over the next week and a half. We'd like to also welcome our web audience who's joining us today and watching us online. If anyone watching out there has any questions, please use a Twitter hashtag AskUSCenter, and we will do our best to get your question to our presenters today. So we definitely want you online to be an active part of the audience here. And that goes for everyone in the room as well. So my name is Amanda McCarty. I work for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States, and I'm pleased to introduce a panel today that has been pulled together by Sarah Terry of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Sarah has 25 years of experience in air quality management and has been working at the United States Environmental Protection Agency since 1991. She arrived at the EPA immediately following the passage of the 1990 Clean Air Amendments and has been involved in nearly all aspects of the air program's technical and policy portfolio. She's a great resource. In addition, she also serves as chair of the ad hoc expert on black carbon under the Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution. She's contributed to the UNEP assessment on black carbon and tropospheric ozone, and she's leading US EPA's Accra Megacity Partnership. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who will introduce the event and the remainder of the panel, and start thinking of those questions.
Okay. Thanks, Amanda. Is that on? Okay, very good. So I'm just going to provide a few overview remarks and then turn it over to my panelists who are the experts on the topics that we're going to talk about. And I'm really thrilled to be here today talking about that place where climate and air quality comes together. Because as many of you know, air pollution is a major risk. We're seeing it more and more around the planet. And recent international studies have given us more information recently about the magnitude of risk that air pollution poses to human health. We know that up to 7 million deaths per year are attributed to air pollution, and that many people who live in our dense urban areas are subject to really high levels of air pollution. And that's just in places where we know what's going on, but in many urban areas, especially in developing countries, there is no measurement of air quality, so we can just speculate based on the best information we have that the air pollution levels are very high. But the fact of the matter is that in some places we just don't know. We do know that in some places of the world, air pollution has been improving. Certainly in the US, we've seen a tremendous improvement in air quality, but in a lot of places have not seen that same level of improvement. And we know that this is one of the single largest environmental health risks that people face. We also know that air pollution is changing the climate. This is something that we haven't been talking about quite as long as we've been talking about air pollution, but in the last 10 years, we've really come to understand how certain components of air pollution are impacting the climate. One in particular, black carbon, it's a component of one of the well-known air pollutants called particulate matter, but it's super warming in the atmosphere, and it also deposits on areas of snow and ice and contributes to melting, and it also impacts rainfall patterns. You know, the last presenter talked about cloud condensation nuclei, for those of you who were here, and actually constituents of particulate matter serve as cloud condensation nuclei, and so they impact clouds, they impact the ability of clouds to form and produce rain. So it's not just about warming when we talk about these pollutants. Methane, people are more familiar with, is a well-known greenhouse gas. It's also an ozone precursor, and ozone is an important air pollutant. And I want to, before turning it over to a couple of my African colleagues, talk about what we know about is going on in Africa with respect to air pollution. And we know it's generally increasing, but you can see from this graphic in the lower part, there are actually very few cities across all the countries in Africa where we have measured air pollution information. And so while we have some general global information about emissions and the increase in air emissions, the fact of the matter is on a city-by-city basis, we don't know as much as we need to. We don't understand the inventories. We don't know very much about the ambient levels of pollution. We don't know how the dust from the Sahara combines with pollutants to form dangerous pollution, contributions from wildfires, which we know are burning in many areas of Africa, what the actual levels of exposure are, where people are, where the pollution is, and how that impacts health. So we know some of these things in the developed world, but we know it's going to be different in other places. And so that brings us to the Accra Megacity Partnership that EPA is collaborating with many others on to take a look at this in an urban context in Accra, Ghana. You can see the graphic here that shows some of the tools that we are bringing to bear on this to give us more information. What is pollution contributing to death? How does that compare against the baseline data? And specifically, we are working with a number of partners to help the Ghana EPA draw conclusions, set priorities, and hopefully move forward to improve health and the environment. So various of our panelists are going to discuss some of this work. I'm going to start with John Pumang from the Ghana EPA. Then we'll hear from Dr. Edith Clark from the Ghana Health Service. And finally, Johan Scherlin-Stierna from the Stockholm Environment Institute, who will cover some key topics related to our partnership and other air quality and climate issues. So my first speaker, John Pumang, is the Acting Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Agency of Ghana. He has experience within the Ghana EPA for nearly 3 decades. We were just comparing notes. We actually started at our agencies about the same time. He has served as the head of various parts of the EPA, including the head of manufacturing industry, the chief scientific secretary, and director of Chemical Control and Management Center of the EPA and the Register of Pesticides. He most recently served as the Deputy Executive Director in charge of operation and has a wide-ranging experience across the EPA. He is also a part-time lecturer in nuclear and environmental protection at the Graduate School of Nuclear and Allied Scientists, a member of Ghana's newly established Nuclear Regulatory Authority, and the author of a number of scientific and technical papers. So please join me in welcoming John Pumang.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and we express our gratitude to the US EPA for making it possible for us to participate in this event. I will give, first of all, I'll give an overview of our country. Where does this work? Is it working? Sorry. I'll give a short overview of the country, Ghana, and then the main purpose of my presentation is to give an account of what we have been doing in the area of air quality management in Ghana. Some of the sources of air pollution that we have in the country. We will also give you some of the results that we have obtained from the monitoring activities that we have undertaken, and then some of the other activities that we are planning for the future, and as well as some of our challenges, then our way forward in terms of our next steps. Ghana is a relatively small country by African standards, 25 million people and a land area of about 238,500 square kilometers. The capital is rather quite a big city compared to other cities in the country. Almost 1/6 of the population reside in the capital, Accra, which has a population of 4 million. And then also Accra is, by the statistics, the 11th largest city in Africa. Now, Ghana has been on the air quality map for quite some time. Accra was one of the cities that was that participated in the Global Environmental Management System. I think many people in this room may not be aware of GEMS, But GEMS was a WHO-sponsored program, and Accra participated actively in it. At the time when I joined the EPC of Ghana those days, I was one of the young officers who were engaged in that. And then, we got a project, the Ghana Environmental Resource Management Project, GEMP, which was sponsored by the World Bank. And so based on our experience with the GEMS, we set up an elaborate air quality management system which covered, in addition to Accra, other cities. We had the other major cities, Tema, Kumasi, Takoradi, and then a mining town, Takwa, where there were a lot of air quality problems. And then as early as 2000, we already came up with our own guidelines in terms of air quality guidelines, which we were intending to make into standards that we could use to enforce compliance. But these standards, by and large, remained on paper from that 2000 all the way up to 2016. Now we are currently trying to get them into law. So, it took about a decade and a half, over a decade and a half to get them into current law in Ghana. And we are only hopeful that that will happen before the close of the year. In the year 2003, the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, tried to get African countries to phase out lead in fuel. And as a baseline, EPA Ghana was contracted to do a baseline of blood levels, of lead in subjects who were along the main roads. So we did a survey to find out the levels of lead in the blood of people, mostly like police officers who were directing traffic, and also schools which were along the main roads. And we found quite exceptional high levels of lead in the blood of these subjects. And we did a subsequent survey after we were able to successfully phase out lead in fuel in 2006, and we were able to find that over the period these levels had come down because of the phase out of the lead in gasoline. US EPA came to our support in 2005, and they have been with us since all this time, and we are very grateful to them for this support. First in the air quality capacity building project, which we are still running, and then the DANIDA also helped us to do some assessment of vehicular emissions. We have problems of vehicular emissions as one of the major sources of air pollution in Ghana. And DANIDA gave us some support to try to do an assessment of what we are getting out of our vehicles in the country. And that was in 2005. US EPA also came in again with the urban transport project in the term year 2005. And now air pollution and associated health effects, which my colleague Edith will talk about into more detail, with the World Bank and the Global Environment Facility. Now we are working with our National Petroleum Authority and other stakeholders, to try to see whether we can make strategies to reduce the levels of sulfur in the fuel that we import into Ghana. Currently we have levels of sulfur, in the range of about 3,000 ppm, in the fuel that we import. And this is too high by all standards. So we are working, to try to see how we can bring that down dramatically. Now, by way of stakeholders, there are quite many, and the coordination of these stakeholders is the key challenge. The EPA is the lead agency in Ghana as far as air quality management is concerned, but we also have the next flag there, the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. We have the Ghana Health Services, where my colleague works. The DVLA is the Driver, Vehicle and Licensing Authority. They license vehicles, and by and large, we are now trying to institute measures to measure emissions before we license vehicles. Currently, vehicles are licensed without measuring how much they emit. And that is why the DVLA is important here. Minister of Transport, Minister of Trade and Industry, Minister of Health, and then the Minister of Environment, Science and Technology, where our agency is housed. Then we have Works and Housing, Roads and Highways, and then the Meteorological Agency, which I think is the equivalent of your NASA in our country. So these are many, and coordinating them is the challenge in trying to get them all to work together, to improve air quality management in the country. Now the major sources, I think these are probably, so in many other countries, but vehicular emission is quite a challenge because we estimate that we have about 820,000, cars in Ghana. Many of them are, used cars which have been imported from other countries where they probably failed emission tests and they are being imported. In addition, we have about 540,000 trucks and buses, many of them second-hand. So this is quite a big challenge. But there are others also like bushfires and also domestic cooking and heating, which can be a problem where people are using mostly biomass as a source of energy. These are just pictures of some of those sources of air pollution that I talked about. And then our air quality management program that we are looking at, this is a map which Sarah also showed, showing some of the sampling sites that we have. And those two corridors which are shown in red are where we are doing the roadside monitoring, air quality monitoring in the country, in the city of Accra. Now, as a way of some results, you see from this slide that EPA Ghana, we have set a limit of 70 micrograms per meter cubed as our standard, even though the WHO has 50. But you can see from the results that, just maybe about one or two readings, actually fall within these limits. All the other readings that we can see are above these two limits that we have. So we do have air quality, air pollution problems in the city of Accra. And when you look at the quality index, the roadside tend to have the worst air quality, with about 4% of the readings that we took, being very highly, unhealthy, and just about 34% being moderate, and then only 9% being of good quality, by the roadside. The industrial is a little better, with about 24% of the readings, being good, but there also we still have quite a problem with the, highly, unhealthy situation of 4%, and then the very unhealthy also 4%. Domestic is a little better, where you don't have anything to do with the very and then the highly, but you have 48% of the readings that we took are quite good, 43 moderate. So residential air quality is somehow, quite, good, even though there are problems of unhealthy for sensitive groups of 9%. No, this is mostly particulate. This particulate matter only that we looked at. So we have a number of programs that we are looking at, and I think that this is the reason for this particular program. The first one, air quality management and planning under the EPA Ghana and the US EPA Megacities program, which is ongoing, and we hope that implementation will start very soon. There is a World Bank, program that my colleague has said we'll talk about, which is looking at the health aspects of the air quality. And then we are looking at the promotion of fuel economy, fuel efficiency, and also to try to reduce the levels of sulfur in our fuel. And also we have recently instituted a program, to use buses along those two routes that are showed in the slide, so that we can reduce the amount of vehicles on those routes. And we're planning to see how we can, improve upon those type of buses, in sometime next year. In terms of the short-lived climate pollutants, we are developing an action plan, and the objectives are mostly to try to see how, we can continue to have sustainable development in Ghana, while at the same time trying to address the issues of short-lived climate pollutants, and this is a program that we are looking at, in the future as part of this Megacities program that we are developing. And, this is still being developed. We have quite a number of challenges because we have quite a lot of data, because as I said, we started air quality monitoring since 1990s, but we are not able to communicate this information, promptly to the general public, to enable them take some, preventive measures. So this is a gap. And also our monitoring equipment that we use are on and off. You go in, take the sample, and then you turn them back on. We don't have continuous monitoring, gadgets. And also we need to expand our monitoring to cover the rest of the country. Mostly we are mostly in Accra, and then slightly in a few of the other major cities, but we have not covered most of the country. And then the effects of air pollution on health, needs to be assessed properly, and into a lot of studies need to be done, and this is not very adequate. Then we import a lot of, I said automobiles which are second-hand, and many of them probably have failed their test of emissions in those countries. So it's a major source of air pollution that we are importing into our country. And then we have high levels of sulfur in the fuels that we import, which are used mostly for our vehicles and also for the generators, because we have problems of energy. So many people try to depend on their own generators for both, domestic and then for use in their industries. We have a problem of, burning of electrical and electronic waste, and I believe many people have probably seen a lot of, pictures of a suburb of Accra they call Agbogloshi, where people are always burning cables to try to recover copper, and this is also another source of, air pollution. By way of next steps, we are looking at, in 2017 to acquire some continuous air monitoring systems that we can use to, try to get real-time data. And then, we want to try to, deploy some household monitoring equipment, because we know that household air quality is quite a problem, where people cook with wood and other, biomass type of fuels, and indoors, it creates quite a lot of problems for young people and also for women in those areas. So we need to put some emphasis on indoor air quality monitoring. And then, our vehicles that we drive in our country, we don't have standards that we have, to use to, manage them, because we recently submitted some drafts so that, vehicles will be tested according to those standards before they will be licensed to, be used in the country. So we are looking at that also. And also we hoping that early next week we will try to put in place one of our first, recycling plants to, break down electrical and electronic gadgets, so that we can prevent the burning of cables to recover copper. So this is something that we think we can, do very quickly. And now currently, the age limit for imported vehicles in Ghana is 10. You can bring a vehicle as old as 10 years, but we're working to see if we can get the tax agencies to agree so that we reduce that age limit to about 8, so at least, so that we can see whether this will improve upon the quality of air coming from, our automobiles. So this is our overview of what we are doing in the area of air quality management, and I believe we can have some more discussion on as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dr. Edith Clark. She's the program manager for Occupational and Environmental Health program at the Ghana Health Service. She's been involved in the development of national policies related to the Ghana National Public Health Act, occupational health and safety policy, and other national level directives. Dr. Clark is a member of the Ghana EPA board and assists in the investigation of environmental infractions with a bearing on health. She's been involved in a number of air pollution-related studies, linking air pollutants and respiratory health in Accra, and developing methodologies for climate change health vulnerability. She's a part-time lecturer at the University of Ghana School of Public Health and has co-authored 4 books and contributed to over 20 peer-reviewed journal articles. Dr. Clark, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and special thanks to the US EPA for the opportunity to be part of this event. My role is to present to us this afternoon the nature of the partnership that has existed between the health sector and the environment sector, particularly the Ghana EPA, over the years in the area of air quality and human health. Okay, so as a health sector, the Ministry of Health, within which the Ghana Health Service is located, is responsible for ensuring the health of all persons resident in Ghana. And the health policy recognizes the fact that even though the Ministry of Health is in charge of health, it does not have the ability to create health per se, because there are very many health determinants, which define the final outcome of health. And therefore, it's important that all other sectors, such as the environment sector and other related sectors, which have a bearing on the environmental risk factors, socioeconomic factors, etc., are all involved in working towards the improvement of risk factors, or the minimization of risk factors to promote good health. So the issue of air quality, is one of these risk factors which, unless it is dealt with appropriately in an integrated manner, both by the health sector and other related sectors like the environment, we will not be able to obtain the ultimate goal of good health, which is really in line with the Libreville Declaration of 2008 that urges African governments to have their ministries of health and ministries of environment integrate their activities to deal with to deal jointly with issues that affect their two sectors. Now, what is the burden of ill health that is posed by air quality related issues? Now, we'll find that much of the information on the impact of climate change on health actually emanates from global burden of disease studies that the WHO has carried out over the years. Now, it has come up with results of studies which demonstrates the attributable disease burden due to various risk factors, including air quality. So the slide we have up here now shows the findings that have been obtained as far as the role that air quality plays, or the role that air pollution plays in affecting or in causing adverse health effects. Now, outdoor air pollution has been placed among the top 10 risks to health worldwide. And this includes household air pollution from the burning of solid fuels, which is commonly used in developing countries. Now, such exposure is estimated to cause over 3 million premature deaths globally. And indeed, in Ghana, it is estimated that household air pollution causes over 3,000 deaths in children under the age of 5 years. Unfortunately, however, as has been explained by my colleague, John, there's a paucity of studies on ambient air quality in Ghana. So it's really difficult to make the link, the association between this level of air quality, this level of deaths attributable to air quality and then deaths in children. Now, according to our statistics, the top 10 causes of death in Ghana are as listed in this slide, with the first 4, lower respiratory infections, stroke, malaria, and ischemic heart diseases, being contributing almost 40% almost 40% of these causes of death are linked with air pollution. That also includes preterm birth complications, and then birth asphyxia and birth trauma. Now, this is quite significant, when linked with the previous slide, which talks about the fact that household air quality, as well as other forms of outdoor air pollution, contributes the number one, or is the number one source of risk in our countries. Now, as far as linking health with air quality, the Ghana Health Service and the EPA have had a long partnership, which has existed since the early 2000s. And some of the work that has been jointly done has to do with assessing the relationship between air quality indices and the incidence of related diseases, in particular acute respiratory diseases. First of all, this has been done among outpatients in Accra. And then secondly, it's been investigated among children under 5 years, who are mainly preschool children. You know, one looked at the air pollutants, you know, that were being monitored at the monitoring stations set up by the EPA, and at the same time trying to assess the occurrence of acute respiratory diseases in these areas over the period. And then a second has to do with exploring the effect of the phase out of lead in gasoline, originally referred to by John. And then the second major activity has been with, the third major activity has been with the development and dissemination of information, education, and communication materials with UNEP support. And this has been done to educate the general public on the effects of air pollution on health and measures that they can take to minimize these risks. In fact, the picture you see is one of the pictures that we've had on our posters that has been used to this effect. Now, some of the findings of on air pollution and health studies that were carried out were that, you know, whereas the pollutants measured included PM10, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, and ground level ozone, the highest PM10 levels were found to occur in roadside locations, and also associations between the incidence of acute respiratory infections and the pollutants were most marked for PM10 levels. Also, the trends of the ARIs follow trends in changes in incidence of the PM10 levels. So you find that soon after changes in PM10 levels, you know, there's also a change in the incidence of these ARIs. And children under 5 years and asthmatics are mostly at risk of ARIs. This is depicted by the next graph, you know, where the top curve indicates the level of PM10s, and then below them you have the trends in diseases. Now, the results of the lead phase out, blood lead levels, you know, shows in the left bar, you know, shows the results in 2003, and then the right bar, the purple bar, or more dark purple, is the 2006 results, and you can see a marked reduction in levels as we phased out the lead and then went into 2006. Now, in the area of climate change and health, you know, it is a known fact that climate change also has links with air pollution, and particularly with the short-lived climate pollutants. There is the likelihood that some of the ill health that we have been seeing, you know, is all related to the changes in weather events that have been occurring. And thus, the health sector, in collaboration with the EPA, has carried out some climate change and health activities, both adaptation and then mitigation measures. And in particular, of interest is what activities, you know, we've put in place to try to mitigate the effect of these pollutants. And of note is a recently started project on reduction of the unintentional persistent organic pollutants and mercury in healthcare waste. This is a JEF UNDP project being carried out in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. Now, the idea is to phase out the use of burning techniques Most of our incinerators are low temperature incinerators, so they generate a lot of dioxins and furans. And in addition to that, we believe they're also generating the short-lived climate pollutants. So by replacing these with non-burn techniques like the use of autoclaves or hydroclaves, we are going to be eliminating the emissions of not only dioxins and furans, but also the short-lived climate pollutants. And then another measure we are putting in place is the establishment of a health and environment information sharing system, or HICE for short, which aims at integrating data on climate change as well as other environmental parameters alongside disease or conditions of ill health. And the aim is to help us monitor very closely the linkages between these. Okay. Now, the Megacity Partnership on Air Quality, that has been under development from 2015 to date, has been between the US EPA, the World Bank, the Ghana EPA, Ghana Health Service, and others. And the overall aim is to facilitate clean air and public health benefits for Ghana. Most of the activities carried out to date has been to do with building of capacity in the development of a communication plan in order to be able to communicate better on the risks from air quality and then the benefits of taking preventive and mitigation action. And then also learning to use predictive tools to assess health benefits of air pollution reduction. And then thirdly, to monetize the health benefits. The policymakers understand monetary terms, when it comes to getting them to take action. So if we can translate the benefits into these terms, it's likely they will take action much quicker. And then also included in the Megacity Partnership is the preparation for a research study to evaluate the health impacts of indoor and ambient air pollution. And the methods to be used will include trying to enhance our disease surveillance system for air quality-related diseases, and then make use of existing data on air quality to support the development of predictive models. And lastly, to conduct health impact assessments using such information collected. Now, apart from the earlier Megacity initiative, there's also the Urban Health Initiative, which has to do with the reduction of short-lived climate pollutants. And all these partners listed here are involved with us. The objectives, again, are to empower the health sector in support of mitigation actions against air pollution and climate change. And essentially, it's also a capacity building initiative to increase the competency of health practitioners in building health arguments regarding action on climate change. So again, it's going to use models and toolkits to improve on outcome analysis of taking action or not taking action on reducing climate pollutants. And by this means, it is hoped that we can convince our policymakers, to be able to make investments in this area. Now, in conclusion, one would say that, a significant feature of the partnerships, as has been described, has been the fact that it's provided opportunities to identify the skills and expertise available in order to identify where gaps are so that capacity can be built. And then secondly, the use of models for determining action that can be used to roll back the burden of disease from air pollution is innovative, and we find it very exciting to use in influencing decision-making. However, it makes certain assumptions, some of which may not be fully applicable to lower and middle-income developing countries like Ghana because of the kind of data that is used to come up with these models. Hence, we believe that locally generated information, as proposed in our PMEH study, will complement the use of these models in order to obtain results that will influence our policy makers in driving and decision making, and also in making investments on emission reductions. Now, the partnership between the health sector, the EPA, US EPA, World Bank, etc., we believe has served as a catalyst for significant action by, as you have seen from the examples we have given, producing some results which, though limited, show some linkages between air quality and air pollution. And we believe that these should be sustained and supported so that we are able to delve more in depth and come up with more solutions to this very thorny issue. Thank you very much for your attention. Doesn't move anymore.
Do you have my She took my cheat sheet. Our next speaker, thank you, Dr. Clark. Our next speaker is Dr. Johan Scherlund-Stierna, who is the Policy Director for the Stockholm Environment Institute and is located at the SEI Center in York, UK. His research has been concerned with various atmospheric issues, including climate change, and in particular aspects of air pollution at scales ranging from regional to global, and pollutant impacts on crops, forests, and human health. He coordinated the UNEP assessment that linked air pollution and radiative forcing issues to black carbon and tropospheric ozone, and is on the science advisory panel of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. He's a leader of the CCAC, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition SNAP, supporting national action planning to develop national planning and take action on short-lived climate pollutants. His interests are also in the effective communication of scientific information to policy and decision makers to promote effective and informed decision making. He's the author of 30 refereed papers, 35 articles, reports, and book contributions. Johan?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you very much to US EPA for inviting me to talk here. And I've worked with Sarah for, I don't know how long now, a long time, at least a decade. And we've also been working with the Ghana EPA now as part of this SLCP strategy development, which you heard about, looking at the national scale and trying to develop some strategies. So that's one aspect. And we're also involved then in terms of the modeling that you heard about from the last speaker. I'm going to describe to you one of the models that are going to be used to support the Ghana EPA in developing the strategies for Accra. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the work that we're doing around a model which is called LEAP IBC. And this is essentially a tool which will allow the countries to develop emission inventories, one of the basic building blocks to understand which sources are giving rise to the air pollution or the SLCPs or greenhouse gases. Also, how we can develop scenarios, because we're interested in the way that these emissions are going. Generally, they're going up in developing countries, but which sectors are expanding, how quickly, and then what are the implications of different mitigation strategies. So we want to have a tool which can help us to look to the future and see how much benefit can be made. So also what this tool does is link the emissions to the air quality changes, and we then go on to impacts in both health, crop yield, and climate. So this tool is something which tries to combine air quality and climate, as Sarah was talking about. So what we have then is we have these three major parts. So one is we got to know what the emissions are and how they're going to change in the future. We've then got to link these emissions to air pollution concentrations. So the air pollution, the PM, the particulate matter, which is killing people, we need a way of showing how the emissions of the precursors of particulate matter are transformed and moved around in the atmosphere and giving rise to different pollution levels. And then we need a way of estimating what are the health impacts of these particulate matter or the ozone, the ground level ozone. What's the impact on climate? If you have SLCP strategies, we can reduce climate, but how much? And then we also know that ozone affects crop yield, so how much can we estimate the benefit is? And this is another way of looking at it. So first of all, we develop a historical emission inventory. This is one of the basic building blocks which has been done for decades now in Europe and US, but not many developing countries have got a comprehensive emission inventory which we need to estimate the impact. So that's one of the things that we do. And we have a default emission data set for the rest of the world because there's also transboundary transport. So if we're going to look at the impact on health, we need to know both the emissions from the country, Ghana, or the city, Accra, but also how much is coming from abroad. Then, in order to work out how these emissions are being transformed and moved around in the atmosphere to give rise to the pollution, we use a model. And the model we used is called Geoschem, and there's a researcher at the University of Colorado who runs the model on our behalf and gives us coefficients, so we can multiply these coefficients times the emission to give us concentration. So then, on the final graph, you can see how we calculate the impact. So we take that annual average concentration of PM2.5 or particulate matter with a diameter of less than 2.5 microns. And then we can read off from a dose-response function the level of premature mortality. So we have the emissions, we have the link between the emissions and the concentrations, and then we make a link to the health impacts. And these are all fairly standard methods which are in the public domain, in the research literature, and used by the WHO and global burden of disease, etc. So what we've done is we put it together in a package which allows the user, so this is the most important part, is that we produce a tool which is then used in the country to develop the capacity in the country to create the quantitative data that they need in order to persuade policymakers it's worth doing something about this issue and that there is something that can be done. And this is then, I've got a few still shots, and then if Sarah allows me, I'll do a live demo, but we'll see whether we get that far. But you can see that this is the sort of what Leap IBC looks like when you open it. So it's a software tool. You've got a menu. You put a way that data is organized into different sectors. And then there are places where you just click on it and you either put in some data or you put it in a function of how that's going to change, for example, with population growth. And so on this level, this at the bottom, we have the number of households increasing over time. So you can show it as charts. So if I take an example here of estimating the emissions, so an emission inventory is basically multiplying two numbers together. You've got a level of activity and you've got an emission factor. You multiply the two together, you get an emission. So that's what we put in here. So this is for the brick kiln sector, traditional brick kilns. This is not Ghana. Don't know if there's many brick kilns in Ghana, but it's just an example. So you put in the 20 million bricks are produced each year, and then you link this with emission factors for all of the pollutants we need to estimate the emissions. Nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, black carbon, organic carbon, etc. And we need to know how the fuel share within a sector is going to change. So for example, this is in biomass cook stoves, and we have a fuel share here, which is traditional stoves using wood waste, and then we have a scenario, so you can see in a little equation which says that 70% of cook stoves by 2050 will be improved. So it's just an equation, and so you can see the change that's assumed to go in the future according to that graph. And so we can estimate emissions. And here are some examples, different pollutants. We have all those pollutants on the side, all the greenhouse gases, not all, but most of the greenhouse gases, but also all the precursors of particulate matter and tropospheric ozone. And then all of these are calculated by the tool. And then we can look at policies. So what we've done here is we've created a cook stove policy where we go from traditional biomass through to improved cook stoves, and a diesel policy where we basically put clean vehicles and clean fuel on the road. And then you can see the avoided emission of black carbon in this case. So over time, as you implement this policy, you reduce significantly the black carbon emissions. So that's a mitigation scenario. So we basically have the emissions times the coefficients, and we end up with an estimate of the PM2.5 concentration made up of different pollutants from different sectors, from Ghana or from other parts of the world. And then we then have the population-weighted PM2.5, and you can see here in the white box the avoided particulate matter pollution from those policies. And this is the number of deaths. So as the population increases, more people die, even for the same level of pollution. But also, we can avoid some of those deaths in the future with these policies. But also, we can look at crop yield loss. So we have dose-response relationships for crop yields. And you reduce the ozone, and you reduce the amount of crops that are lost to ozone. And we can calculate that. And also, we have a way of looking at the impact of all emissions on global warming, and we can look at the avoided warming in terms of equilibrium temperatures. So many of the benefits, the climate and the air quality benefits, we can calculate using this tool. Now what we want to do, so at the moment we're working with Ghana EPA at the national scale, so looking at national scale emission inventories, but now what we want to do as part of the Megacities program is to use this for Accra. And what we want to do is we want to have a separate emission inventory for Accra. We want to have modeling which looks at, instead of looking at the whole of Ghana, looks just at the city of Accra. And then we use the concentration to estimate impacts for health and assess mitigation scenarios. And this map here is actually showing similar work that's been done with the atmospheric model for Beijing. And it's showing in this example that it shows all of these colors are where the pollution comes from. So the pollution in Beijing doesn't just come from Beijing. Only 50% comes from Beijing. The other half comes from outside, from other regions. So we will be able to show the same sort of thing for Accra. And so this is the sort of thing, this is a dummy, this is the sort of thing we'll be able to show. We can show how much comes of for example, the PM2.5 comes from Accra, how much from places in Ghana outside Accra, and how much from sources outside of Ghana. And we can also do that for understanding the contribution from different sectors and different pollutants. So to summarize then, so LEAP IBC, the Integrated Benefits Calculator, is a tool which allows integrated assessment of SLCPs, air pollution and climate change issues for any country. And we're going to make templates for over 100 countries. We can estimate emissions for a historical year and calculate scenarios of the future. We can use it to calculate the concentrations of key pollutants affecting health, crop yields, and temperature change. And then we can look at the, quantify these impacts. And we focus on a user-friendly tool where the focus is on building the capacity in the countries that we work with. And we're working with Ghana EPA, but also other countries in the region, including Nigeria and Morocco. Now we're working on this urban enhancement, so we'll be able to sort of do this integrated assessment for the city of Accra. And that will be occurring next year, working with all of our colleagues here. So that's my talk. I don't know if I've got chance for a live demo.
Yeah, pull it up. We'll take some questions while you set that up. Well, he's putting the slider demo up. If there are any questions.
Any questions at all? Perfect.
Thank you very much. understood that there are coefficients you need to multiply the emission by in order to get the concentration. Are these available to 100 countries or only to Ghana?
So what we're going to do is we are, US EPA are funding Davin Henze to produce coefficients for over 100 countries. And we're in the process of doing that at the moment. So we will make these LEAP IBC templates available for over 100 countries. But it's work in progress. So we have got, we have Mexico, we're doing Chile, Peru, Colombia, Bangladesh. There's a list of priority list, and we're moving down it, and we'll make things available.
Any other questions?
I came a little late, but maybe you have already mentioned this. For Beijing, you said how much is the pollution produced locally and how much comes from different sources? Is it based on some circulation model or isotope or?
Yes. So the results of that are based on the model which is used in LEAP IBC. It's called GeosChem, and it's the GeosChem adjoint model. So it's running the model backwards to see if you look at Beijing's or Accra's or any city's pollution, where's it coming from? And they found in that study that 50% was coming from the city and 50% from regions all over that part of China.
Why don't you go ahead and do a short demo, and then we'll take any other questions.
So, right. So what I've got here is, I've done it all. Well, sorry, do you want to take some more questions?
All right. He's showing the end instead of the beginning. So are there other questions while he resets it from the beginning? Okay.
I see you have a research on the Beijing air pollution, and I live in Beijing. And I wonder maybe there is some similarity between Beijing and Ghana on the air pollution problem.
The question is the similarities between the air pollution problem in a city like Beijing and a city like Accra. I know if you look at some of the sources, for example, transport, household, cooking, some of those would be similar, but I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you. I think that the sources may be similar, but in terms of the scale, looking at the population of the city of Beijing, we may not be able to compare with, our city is just 4 million. Accra is just 4 million people. And also, in terms of vehicles, I think Beijing, maybe they are introducing bicycles and so forth. So it will be very difficult for us now, if we don't look at the data that they have in Beijing, it will be difficult to compare what they have over there with Accra. That's what I can say. Maybe.
I think that one thing which is clear is that every city, every country has got a different set of problems, a different set of emission sources. And that's the one reason why we want to give the tool to different countries, different cities, because so that they can put in their own data and then they'll be able to. So for example, in Bangladesh, they have rice parboiling, 50,000 rice parboiling units across the whole country, which are very polluting. Now other countries don't do that, so they don't have that pollution source. And the same in Ghana, there will be some specific sources of pollution. We know indoor air pollution and transport are going to be two big ones, but there are other ones as well.
You've got 2 minutes here.
Okay, so what I've got here is an overview of LEAP IBC. This is for an Asian country. And we have here the black carbon emissions. And so if we were to look into this in a bit more detail, you can see that this is broken down into a number of sectors. So if I click on here, you've got residential, you've got manufacturing, construction, and transport. So this is the black carbon emission. And then going back to the overview. So you've got organic carbon, nitrogen oxides, ammonia, and SO2. So all of these give rise to PM2.5. And you can see that there are estimates for the emissions. Now, what we can do is we can look at some policies. So we assume that here, I'm pulling a slider across, so all cook stoves go from traditional to LPG. All of the kerosene lanterns, also producing indoor air pollution, goes to solar. All diesel vehicles become ultra clean. And then so in this particular Asian country, all of the brick kilns move from traditional technology to better, and we ban the open burning of crop residues. And then we press refresh, and we get, it's now calculating all of the emissions again for all of the scenarios, and it takes a few seconds. So if you wait with bated breath, you will see a change in the overall emission. And what you'll see is there. So this is the avoided black carbon. So you've got rid of almost all of the black carbon, almost all of the organic carbon, and a certain amount of the nitrogen oxide emissions. And what we also then can do is to look at the impacts of that. And here you're seeing the PM2.5 concentrations in 2010, and then we start implementing this policy until 2030. This is the avoided PM2.5 concentration. This is the avoided deaths. And we also have avoided deaths from ozone concentrations. And we can look at the table, and we can see that in 2030, in this particular example, we avoid 40,000 deaths per year through these measures. So these are the sorts of things that can be done and will be able to be done for the urban scale in Accra. It's already being implemented very well in Ghana by the Ghana EPA at the national scale. We're adding to this tool all the time.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Please give a round of applause to our speakers here. Please don't forget, at 3 p.m. we have another presentation on this hyperwall here, and this is going to be titled Atmospheric Composition and Air Quality. Please come back at 3 p.m. for a NASA hyperwall session. Thank you.